Hello and welcome to another Mage Tower guide. This time we're going to be going over the Feral Druid. So as always, we're going to start with our consumables. We're going to need flasks of the 7th demon, potions of prolonged power, food of some kind, I'll go over that in a second, and either drums of fury or the mountain, either one, it doesn't matter, they're the same thing. So going back to the food, it's going to vary wildly what your best stat is depending on your gear as well as your talent setup. So I'd highly suggest simming yourself with whichever talent setup you decide to go with and go from there. For me, with this setup of talents and with the gear that I had, it turned out that crit was my best stat. So I would have used crit food if I used food. I actually only use drums for this. But if you feel like you need a little extra kick, then that's what I would do to figure out what is the best stat for your food. Moving on to talents. So in the first tier, I went with Predator. This fight has a lot of adds that we're going to be cleaving down, which will allow us to get a lot of resets on our Tiger Fury with Predator. So absolutely best in the first tier. In the second tier, you can go with either Renewal or Displacer Beast, but honestly, the healing from Renewal is kind of overkill, and Displacer Beast just gives you so much more control over the fight with trying to get away from the Fuming Imps, getting out of the puddles if you happen to find yourself in one, as well as getting away from the boulders in the second phase. So I just like having more movement in most situations, and this fits really well with this encounter. In the next row, kind of on that same idea, I went with Resto Affinity, but I felt like that was also overkill. I feel like getting more out of the range from the Balance Affinity would have been really useful for your Thrashes and your Brutal Slashes. So if I could do it again, I would go with the Balance Affinity. In the next tier, I went with Typhoon, but you can really make an argument for any of these. It just depends on your playstyle. Typhoon was really good as you can knock back the Fuming Imps if they start casting Plague Zone in a place where you don't want them to be, as well as if you just want to keep them at a distance so you can finish what you're doing, whether that's finishing off another ad or putting in enough damage on Agatha to interrupt Dark Fury. It just has a lot of utility for this fight. Mass Entangle can be good if you don't want the Imp Servants to ever get to Agatha, but that's just too much work in my opinion, and is a little bit more difficult than the fight needs to be. In the next tier, it's between Incarnation and Jagged Wounds. I would highly suggest Jagged Wounds just because it's more useful to keep your damage up throughout the fight instead of bursting all in one point. Moving on, in the next tier, we've got Brutal Slash, and this is your only option here as this is a heavy ad cleave fight. And this gives us our highest AoE potential. You'll just have to watch out for the charges if you're not used to using it. And finally, we have Blood Talons, as this allows us to put an instant cast regrowth into our natural rotation, which we would have needed to do anyway just to handle the extra bits of healing we need, as well as giving us a 20% buff to our next two abilities. So that's what I went with. There are some other builds out there that you can use, but for the ease of it, I would say that this is probably the easiest build to use that kind of covers all of your bases. So with that being said, before we get to the kill video, let's go over the fight and the abilities that we're going to be seeing. So the boss we're going to be fighting in this encounter is Agatha, who has a handful of abilities. The first one is Shadow Stab. There's really nothing you can do about this. This is just unavoidable damage. The next ability she has is called Dark Fury. She will put an absorb shield around herself that you will have to damage your way through before you can interrupt her cast. This should be your top priority when you see this come up, as the longer this channel goes on, the more damage you will take. Her next ability is called Agatha's Fury. This will put purple swirlies on the ground that you'll just want to avoid. And finally, we have her last ability, which is Fell Lava Lash. These are only in phase 2, and these are green swirlies, but when they land, they will also leave behind a puddle of fel that will deal damage if you stand in them. Moving on to the adds, the first ones we're going to be seeing are called Smoldering Imps. They have one ability called Firebolt, which the more casts of this that they're able to get off, the higher the damage it will deal. So we want to kill these as fast as we can. The next adds we'll be seeing are called Umbral Imps. They have a Shadow Bolt that just does damage, and Translocate, which will teleport them a very short distance away, but they usually still stay kind of in a group. However, they also have the ability to shield Agatha. When these guys are out, Agatha will be completely immune to all damage, so these guys must take top priority when they're out. Otherwise, Agatha will take no damage whatsoever and also will not be able to be interrupted, which will be very important with dealing with Dark Fury. So kill these ASAP. The next adds are the Imp Servants. These will spawn away from Agatha and then run towards her. Once they get close enough to her, they will start channeling funnel energy. This will heal her slightly and also start increasing her damage. You can interrupt this cast if you want to, but it's really not necessary, and it's probably better just to hold it for Dark Fury. And finally, the last adds we'll have to deal with are called Fuming Imps. These guys will spawn in and start running towards you. If they reach you, they will start casting Plague Zone, which will explode and then leave a puddle of decay on the ground. If you stand in this, you'll take a large amount of damage, as well as you'll be slowed while you're in that circle. And one last thing to note about the fight. In Phase 2, you'll start having to deal with these flaming boulders. They will always come from the upper platform and roll down to the lower platform. So just make sure you're finding a way to dodge these, as if they hit you, they will stun you for 6 seconds and deal most of your health in damage. So make sure you're avoiding these, as if they do hit you, it's pretty much always a wipe. And that's about it. So let's move on to my kill of Agatha. Okay, so just before we start, I just wanted to say I haven't really played this class since Mists of Pandaria, so I apologize for my terrible play, which you will see at times, but it does show that with proper gear and the knowledge of the fight that we can make it work. So we start off just getting some damage in using Thrash on the first group of Smoldering Imps we're going to get, and we just want to cleave them down with Brutal Slash. So I wasn't very lucky with killing them too quickly. Still one up, but we'll just kind of cleave him down over time here, finish him off right there, and then back to Agatha. So next we're going to get one Fuming Imp and the 2 Servants. So I'm just going to kite the Fuming Imp around using Rip to slow him down a little bit and get some more damage in on the Servants. And originally I was just going to let him explode, but since I got some useful crits there, I just went ahead and finished him off. So if you aren't able to kill them fast enough, you really want to make sure they're not exploding right in the middle of the room, but off to the sides as best as you can. So here we get our first Dark Fury, and what we're going to want to do is break the shield as fast as we can, and then interrupt her cast. However, what you're going to see here is I missed my opportunity to interrupt her cast. Whatever it was, I think I must have turned at a weird angle, but I didn't use my interrupt for some reason. So now that the Umbral Imps are out, we have to kill those first. So we'll be running all over the place trying to get these Umbral Imps down, as well as more damage on the Servants. But all the while, I'm going to be taking a good amount of damage. You'll see my health start kind of taking chunks away as we go here. But fortunately, I didn't even notice that I hadn't interrupted it. I could have sworn I had, but apparently I hadn't. But it's not that big of a deal. We'll start slowly gaining our health back with regrowth over time. And there you see me hitting another Fuming Imp with Typhoon, and you can see why Typhoon's so useful. So if you ever get a Imp to start casting Plague Zone in a place you don't want him to, as long as you can hit him with Typhoon, you can get a redo on that. And here we get some more Servants, and we'll just go ahead and switch to them. Again, trying to do as much damage to the Imps. We really don't want these guys to get overlapped with more and more Imps, as you will slowly get overwhelmed. So here you're going to see something weird. You're going to see these rains of fire coming down, these big meteors, and that is because the world buffs that you get out in the world work in here. And that's just whatever world buff was just happened to be there this day. That's what happened to proc. So you can also use things like the potion of, I think it's called the Lightblood potion. That will work in here too, and apparently that is ridiculous. But since I do think that's kind of cheesing it a little bit, and I didn't want to cheese it, I didn't feel like I needed to cheese it, I decided not to use that. But just know that world buffs do work in here as well. So anyway, back to the fight, finishing off these adds. So we got a set of Imp Servants right before the next phase here. So I did not want to, again, get overwhelmed with adds, so I'm just going to pump in as much damage as I can to these guys before I move up to Agatha, so I won't get overwhelmed later on. And there's an instance of me letting a Plague Zone go off, as it's off to the side, and now I'm back up on Agatha. So here we're going to get a bunch of Imps, and again, just get kind of positioned so you can hit all of them with your Brutal Slash, so you can cleave them down extra quickly. So you can see the little dragons over there in the corner just kind of hitting her. Again, another one of those world buffs. So again, thrashing these guys down. There's another Fuming Imp. I move them off to the side. I decide, yep, that's fine. Off to the side is fine like that. try to get a little bit more damage in on these Imp Servants, but I don't want to spend too much time as I still have to get ready for Dark Fury, which just went off. So again, trying to get the shield down and interrupted so we don't have that same problem with the Umbral Imps again. I don't know why I was being so delayed on my interrupts, but there's a good like half second to a second where I'm not reacting quickly. I don't know why that's happening. There's another Fuming Imp, and I couldn't target it quite right. I couldn't get my angle the way I wanted it to. Again, bad reaction time there. So we do have one that goes off in the back. Here you'll see there's just a lot of imps up. So for me, this is where I decided to use drums. So that's how I would use drums, is just as a reactive, like, oh crap, I need to keep up with these adds. I can't afford to, you know, get behind here. So that's what I did. There was a lot of adds up. It's very easy to get overwhelmed in those situations. So if I were you, I would save your drums for a situation like that where all of a sudden you're just kind of overwhelmed with imps. So that's how I used it anyway. So I'm just going to try to kite this imp around, but I wasn't quite successful. But honestly, in the back or right directly underneath Agatha is not a terrible place to drop those. As you know, she has a fairly big hitbox. So if it's right directly underneath her, you know, there could be worse locations, kind of like this one. So here we've got her pretty low, but we still don't want to get sloppy with the adds. So I'm going back over here, getting my dots up on the Servant. I've got another couple adds here that I've got to deal with. So again, just AoEing them down as much as I can. Another Fuming went off in a kind of a bad place, but I'll just have to stay more on the left side to finish off the fight. So that's the last Umbral Imp. So she's now vulnerable again. I'm just going to kind of cleave off of this Smoldering Imp, just again to be extra safe before going on to Agatha one last time and finishing her off. So that's the fight right there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, it's kind of annoying that those world buffs actually affect this fight to some degree. It just depends if you have them up or not. You can kind of, you know, get your schedule to work around that if you want. I don't feel like it was absolutely necessary. There was that one point where it looked like it was going to help me out and a whole lot. So, you know, take that as you will. I didn't want to just delay doing it just because those world buffs were up. But just, you know, use that to your advantage. If you're really struggling with this, use that Lightblood elixir or potion, whatever it's called, as it will help out a lot. I've heard really good things about it as far as how much damage it can do. So just know that that's there for you to use as well if you need that extra boost, because I hear it does a lot of damage. But overall, this is another fun one. I kind of screwed up in the sense that I feel like I completely overgeared it and would really like to try it again on a lower item level. However, that's not possible with the way that Blizzard has set these up. So, you know, it is what it is. Hopefully I was able to break it down in a way that makes sense to you, in a way that you can replicate it for yourself if you're still struggling with this. So hopefully it was helpful. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video.